Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And in this episode, I'll look at the reasons why I've been questioning Humza Yousaf cancelling a £200,000 donation to Unicef in favour of a £250,000 donation to the Unrwa. This decision, as I've covered previously, went against advice from the Department of External Affairs and a decision made by ministers to give the money to Unicef despite having three options available to them, and Humza at 11th hour totally going against it. Now, the reason I had my concerns over the Unicef money being cancelled was quite simply because I had facts in front of me, and I'll share those facts with you today. This is not part two of the full story. This is just an appendix to it. There's still more information to come out about Humza and the 250,000. This is separate. Now, when I asked the Scottish Government for an FOI about this money and the decision-making process involved, they gave me a heavily redacted response, but there was some 49 pages of information there. And included in it was the UNRWA's appeal to the rest of the world to give them $103 million to help them provide 90 days more aid to Gaza. Upon reading this appeal and the finer detail of this appeal, left me to consider if this was in fact a worthy cause. There was two alarming details in their appeal, which made me, as a Scottish citizen, very concerned as to why we would have chosen that option. Again, an option that was not advised by the Department of External Affairs and also not the decision made by ministers. Now, in the breakdown of why they needed $103 million, there was a $21.3 million line in the appeal, which said was for operational costs, including staffing, safety, and security. Now, there was two eyebrow-raising points from that alone. The first thing is, UNRWA is a charity that's 50, 60, maybe even 70 years old. It's a very long-established charity, and it only has one process, and that is to look after, as they term them, refugees from Palestine, right? So this charity will already have operational costs, including staffing, in all their normal budgets. However, as part of this claim, they're suggesting that they need £21.3 million for that and other things. And the other things are safety and security. Now, I think, as I say, it's fair to use common sense and logic and suggest that they already have operational costs and staffing looked after in their normal budget. So it's safe to assume that safety and security amount for the majority of, if not all of, the £21.3 million that they're asking the world for. My concern with that is there is a war zone in Gaza, in an area totally controlled by Hamas. Who is able to provide any security within that area that would cost UNRWA up to £21.3 million? Now, I can't think of many private security companies that will be able to work in that area just now, especially as it's so heavily controlled and totally controlled by Hamas. So that only leaves me with one possible alternative, and that is Hamas provide security and safety for the UNRWA charity, of which they're wanting £21.3 million for 90 days to help cover that cost. Now, it might not be the total $21.3 million because they have put in the accounts, and I'll show it on the screen, that they're looking for operational costs, including staffing, safety and security. And I've already suggested that the operational costs and staffing are probably already covered. That concerns me. Now, the information that I'm looking at is the same information that the Department of External Affairs, Scottish Government ministers, and indeed the First Minister had at their disposal when they made decisions. And I cannot tell you why the original offer was to give to Unicef. But I would imagine things like this might have been taken into consideration. However, things like this were totally ignored when the First Minister overruled the first decision to give the money to Unicef, and he instigated it went to UNRWA. That is one of two reasons I questioned cancelling the Unicef money in favour of UNRWA. The second reason is on their description for this appeal. They wanted one-off payments of $45 in cash for the 250,000 people to help cover their immediate costs. Now that $45 in cash, in US dollars, to give to 250,000 people adds up to $11,250,000. However, the claim was actually for almost 12.5 million. So they're actually wanting even more cash than adds up to how they justified asking for it in the first place. Now, my concern with this, and again applying common sense and logic, if you're in Gaza right now and someone was to hand you $45 US, where do you spend it? How can you spend it? We're led to believe that industry, commerce is all wiped out in Gaza. So I would imagine this cash in dollars, specifically asked for in dollars, could potentially be for black market. And I understand that. I sympathise with that. I can understand that when society breaks down, people run black markets. But my question again is, who runs black market operations in Gaza right now? We've already seen suggestions that aid is sometimes not handed out free and ends up on the black market, and people have to pay for aid that has been given by the rest of the world to feed the people in Gaza. Again, going back to my question of who can provide security in Gaza right now, I think it's fair to assume, using common sense and logic, that Hamas may have something to do with the black market in Gaza and potentially selling aid back to the people. Okay? So therefore, what UNRWA are asking for is a big suitcase full of cash, which would be just under $12.5 million, to give to the people, to give to whoever is running the black market operations in Gaza right now. Another thing I had to consider is I've never seen $12.5 million in the one place at the one time. I would imagine it would be quite a lot of suitcases, briefcases, or packages, however you wish to supply the money. Now, that would be quite a dangerous thing to have when you have terrorists controlling an area and you're able to ask for this money in the knowledge that it's going to get to the end user. The money would also not be in large denominations if you want to give each of the 250,000 people affected $45. That makes it an even bigger amount. You couldn't even have it in $50 denominations. It need to be 20s, 10s and 5s. That's a mountain of cash. And you want that money to come into a country that's in the middle of a war, that in an area that's controlled by a terrorist organisation, and expect it A, to be safe, and B, to be distributed to the population, who then in turn would have to spend that money on the black market. That is why I felt at the time that giving to UNRWA was unsafe, possibly unsafe, because these things might not be true. They're just, well, I'm using common sense and logic. However, the UNICEF money, the UNICEF offer, the UNICEF appeal was completely safe. because Unicef were going to take water to Gaza. Now, that was actually, when you look at the papers I have, the first request from the First Minister was to help with this situation where there was a water shortage in Gaza. There was 3 proposals put on the table. The Department of External Affairs, rightly in my opinion, recommended Unicef, as they currently had a water appeal going on at that time in the end of October. And it would have been a safer use, because you know where the funds are going, you know what they're getting used for. The UNWRA money was given unrestricted, and for reasons I've highlighted previously. That's why I was concerned at the time, and why I feel, and still feel, that Unicef would have been far better placed for the money from Scotland to go. The person that made that decision that it wouldn't go there was not the Scottish Government, was not the executive within Scottish Government civil service. It was one person, Humza Yousaf. He overturned the decision and ignored advice. And he refuses to be drawn in to a conversation of why. Anyone who asks him why are brandished Islamophobic, far-right and conspiracy theorists. Let me remind you that all the information I've shared came from the Scottish Government through an FOI request. So the information, if it's homophobic, right-wing or conspiracy theorists, then take your complaint to the Scottish Government, who provided me with the information. This, my people, I told you when I got it, I got this information, I told everybody that watched the videos that this was horrendous. This was horrific. You may understand why now. Because there's still more information to come. So, unless you're Humza Yousaf, have a great day. Cheery bye now.